And there passed before his mind a whole series of these mettlesome, vigorous, self-confident men, who always and everywhere drew his inquisitive attention in spite of himself. He tried to dispel these thoughts, he tried to persuade himself that he was not living for this transient life, but for the life of eternity, and that there was peace and love in his heart. But the fact that he had in this transient, trivial life made, as it seemed to him, a few trivial mistakes tortured him as though the eternal salvation in which he believed had no existence. But this temptation did not last long, and soon there was re-established once more in Alexey Alexandrovich's soul the peace and the elevation by virtue of which he could forget what he did not want to remember. Chapter 26. "Well, Kapitonich?" said Seryosha, coming back rosy and good-humored from his walk the day before his birthday, and giving his overcoat to the tall old hall porter, who smiled down at the little person from the height of his long figure. "Well, has the bandaged clerk been here today?" "Did Papa see him?" "He saw him. The minute the chief secretary came out, I announced him," said the hall porter with a good-humored wink. "Here, I'll take it off." "Seryosha," said the tutor, stopping in the doorway leading to the inner rooms. "Take it off yourself." But Seryosha, though he heard his tutor's feeble voice, did not pay attention to it. He stood keeping hold of the hall porter's belt, and gazing into his face. "Well, and did Papa do what he wanted for him?" The hall porter nodded his head affirmatively. The clerk with his face tied up, who had already been 7 times to ask some favor of Alexey Alexandrovich, interested both Seryosha and the hall porter. Seryosha had come upon him in the hall, and had heard him plaintively beg the hall porter to announce him, saying that he and his children had death staring them in the face. Since then Seryosha, having met him a second time in the hall, took great interest in him. "Well, was he very glad?" he asked. "Glad? I should think so." Almost dancing as he walked away. "And has anything been left?" asked Seryosha, after a pause. "Come, sir," said the hall porter, then with a shake of his head he whispered, "Something from the Countess." Seryosha understood at once that what the hall porter was speaking of was a present from Countess Lydia Ivanovna for his birthday. "What do you say? Where? Corny took it to your papa. A fine plaything it must be too. How big? Like this? Rather small, but a fine thing. A book? No, a thing. Run along, Vasily Lukitch is calling you," said the porter, hearing the tutor's steps approaching, and carefully taking away from his belt the little hand and the glove half pulled off, he signed with his head towards the tutor. "Vasily Lukitch, in a tiny minute," answered Seryosha with that gay and loving smile which always won over the conscientious Vasily Lukitch. Seryosha was too happy, everything was too delightful for him to be able to help sharing with his friend the porter the family good fortune of which he had heard during his walk in the public gardens from Lydia Ivanovna's niece. This piece of good news seemed to him particularly important from its coming at the same time with the gladness of the bandaged clerk and his own gladness at toys having come for him. It seemed to Seryosha that this was a day on which everyone ought to be glad and happy. "You know Papa's received the Alexander Nevsky today?" "To be sure I do. People have been all ready to congratulate him." "And is he glad?" "Glad at the Tsar's gracious favor. I should think so." "It's a proof he's deserved it," said the porter severely and seriously. Seryosha fell to dreaming, gazing up at the face of the porter, which he had thoroughly studied in every detail, especially the chin that hung down between the grey whiskers, never seen by anyone but Seryosha, who saw him only from below. "Well, and has your daughter been to see you lately?" The porter's daughter was a ballet dancer. "When is she to come on weekdays?" "They've their lessons to learn too." "And you've your lesson, sir, run along." On coming into the room, Seryosha, instead of sitting down to his lessons, told his tutor of his supposition that what had been brought him must be a machine. "What do you think?" he inquired. But Vasily Lukitch was thinking of nothing but the necessity of learning the grammar lesson for the teacher, who was coming at 2. "No, do just tell me, Vasily Lukitch," he asked suddenly, when he was seated at their work table with the book in his hands, "what is greater than the Alexander Nevsky?" You know Papa's received the Alexander Nevsky? Vasily Lukich replied that the Vladimir was greater than the Alexander Nevsky. And higher still? Well, highest of all is the Andrei Pervozvany. And higher than the Andrei? I don't know. What, you don't know? And Seryosha, leaning on his elbows, sank into deep meditation. His meditations were of the most complex and diverse character,